Good morning, everyone. Let's see some excerpts from Egan's developmental model of counseling. It is in Unit 2, Lesson 4. Let us see the theoretical basis of developmental model of Egan. As we all know, a good model of counseling should integrate best helping techniques into goal-oriented systematic scheme. According to Aristotle, it should contain a beginning, middle, and an end. Egan's three-stage developmental model also contains this beginning, that is thinking, middle, that is judging, and act. It is think, judge, act, that is exploring the problem, understanding its ramifications and demands, and acting to solve it. It is progressive and interdependent. The three stages in Egan's developmental model are progressive in nature and interdependent. The primary goal of this developmental model is constructive behavior change. The theoretical basis of developmental model are as following. The first one is the work of Kharkov and other psychologists. This is training approach to helping. According to Kharkov, the best mode of treatment is to train the helpee directly and systematically in skills he needs to live more effectively, that is human relations and problem solving skills. He emphasizes the client's determination instead of power of the helper. Ivy and Associates have proposed micro-counseling technologies. Kagan and Associates have proposed micro-skill approach, which also includes interpersonal recall, which is an inquiry session after every counseling session. So, such theories are the basis of developmental model of Egan. Second is the social influence theory. According to Egan, helping is a social influence process. According to him, all human interaction can be conceptualized from the viewpoint of social influence process. As soon as a person is involved with the fellow human beings, he either becomes an influencer or influenced. And this can happen by acting or by not acting. By not acting is by being silent, and by acting means by showing some care, respect, cooperating, or either being cynical, etc. So one becomes an influencer and influenced by acting or not by acting, and the society is charged with social influence attempts. Everybody is involved in it either overtly or covertly in everyday transactions and in helping situations. And Frank has used persuasion and healing. This is to point out social influence elements in widely divergent approaches to helping. And Stanley Armstrong, he proposed a two-stage model in which in stage 1 the helper establishes power or influence base with communication of respect, genuineness and empathy with the client, and in stage 2 he or she influences the client. This is social influence theory. Third is learning theory and principles of change in behavior. The knowledge of basic principles underlying learning, unlearning and relearning is required to the helper. And the basic, according to Egan, the basic issue of counseling is reliability and it is not the. We should also think about the progression of each stage, that after one stage comes the other stage. The completely non-directive counselor stays at stage 1 or perhaps proceeds to the beginning of stage 2. He assumes that if he helps the client to explore his behavior and to begin to understand himself, constructive forces that are somehow lying dormant in the client will be released. The client, once these forces have been released, will go on to change his behavior and live more constructively. On the other hand, the completely directive counselor begins at stage 3. He listens to client's story and then begins what to do in his problem almost immediately to give the client advice. He assumes that the client does not know what to do about his problems. In a sense, the highly directive counselor sees the client as a problem rather than as a person. Once he understands the problem sitting in front of him, he engages in a great deal of problem solving behavior. The model proposed by Egan suggests that both of these extremes are inadequate approaches to learning. The completely non-directive counselor fails to understand certain kinds of interactions like helper self-disclosure, confrontation, immediacy, and that can help the client understand himself more fully. Further, the completely non-directive counselor is in no position to help the client through the action stages. He assumes that understanding is enough. The completely directive counselor fails to realize that constructive behavioral change is based on client's ability to understand himself, to see the bigger picture, to place himself and his behavior in a wider context. He fails to see that it is not enough that he understands the person in need of help. Often, the overly directive person will take the client many questions to get the kind of information that he thinks he needs in order to solve the other problems. Even when this process works, it is self-defeating for the client, as he has not learned how to take the counsel with himself and how to go about handling his own problems. With this, we'll move on to the goal-directed nature of the counseling. And goal-directed nature of counseling means beginning with the end. And here the client's goals and action programs are there. According to Thorne, client action from learning point of view, that is modifying the learning process, that is learning, unlearning and relearning is important. Some counselors focus on behavior modification and problem solving models only, that is they concentrate on stage 3 directly, minimizing stage 1 and 2. Stage 1 and 2 are also important because they add value as an expression for respect for client and to prepare for action. These cannot be the ends in themselves. So, there should not be overemphasis also. Just listening and understanding are not enough. If needed, more action in helping process is to be exercised by the helper to make the client an agent of his or her own life. And then person-centered counseling. This says that counseling process should focus on the person rather than the person's problems. As the counseling process moves, the problem might change. For example, if somebody is drinking, that drinking cannot be the problem itself. That might be a symptom of self-inadequacy. Presenting problem is often not a problem at all. Client may push safe problem out front to see how the counselor handles it, and later after trust is developed, he may or self-disclose. And a good helper, in spite of self-defeating patterns of behavior uh, of the client and the necessity for behavioral change, he or she prizes the client for being themselves and not for they are the problems to be solved. Good helper works at respecting the helper and also works at respecting the client and also does not work at being liked or loved by the client. He is satisfied if he gains the respect of the